Welcome. Thanks for tuning in today. This is Yaz.life and my name is Yaz. This is the fourth part of the Voices in Your Head series. The link to part 1, 2 and 3 are in the description below. I do recommend that you watch them as you might find this video pretty tricky to keep up with if you haven't. The Voices in Your Head series has its own dedicated playlist on my channel where you will find all other related videos. Now let's look at a quick summary of what we've covered in the last few videos. So we've looked at which situations the knowledge of ego states can support you in, which is understanding how knowing this information can help me in my everyday life, because that's the bottom line, right? How can I take this and do some really great things with it? We looked at what ego states look like and how they work. We then went on to relating this knowledge to your upbringing, observing yourself and others relating to thoughts, feelings and behaviours, specifically in relation to triggers and responses. And then we've looked at a breakdown of critical parent and a breakdown of nurturing parent. Now, before we dig right in, just a reminder that I've done in the last couple of videos. No state of mind is good or bad. They will either be helpful to you in particular situations or unhelpful. This knowledge is really not designed to bring about judgment on yourself or others. This knowledge is not designed for you to start pointing your finger at other people and telling them about themselves, or judging yourself and telling yourself about yourself. The examples that I'm going to use in this video are of extremes. So you might look around you and go, "Ooh, I know somebody that does that, but they don't do it in such an extreme." No, that's because this video is giving you the extreme so that you get a good idea of it. The voices. Let's put a face to the name. The name is rebellious child. As by its second word, it is part of the child state of mind. And when we move into this particular state of mind, we will move into a place that we used to be when we were a child growing up. So it would be you when you were a child growing up, when you move into that state of mind. An example would be that you would have to have had a rebellion at some point in your life growing up for you to have a strong rebellious child state of mind. If you never rebelled, then there's a big chance that you don't have a very strong rebellious child state of mind, meaning you don't move into it. It probably means that you have quite a strong adapted child. And so that's where you tend to be, okay? It's important to remember this because it's about you and your upbringing, which means if you never behaved that way growing up, it means that you're probably not going to move into that state of mind as an adult because it's not a strong default mechanism that you have. Rebellious child usually relates to ages between 8 and up, around 19, up to about 19. Depending on your particular upbringing, it can be earlier and it can be in later years if your upbringing was rather challenging. As you can see, the child state is below the others. It's at the bottom. This ego state's position is specifically there for a reason, as are both parent and adult states above the child. They're in positions of responsibility and authority over them. The child states are not in positions of responsibility or authority. This is important to bear in mind as these are the subtle differences that you're going to need to use to identify the various states of mind accurately. It's going to be really easy for you to get them wrong. And then when you do, and if you use this strategy and use some of the things that we've talked about, it's going to blow up in your face. And then you're going to want to tell me off. And I'm going to say, aha. Did you use the subtle differences that I spoke about? No, you didn't, did you? See, that's why. So it's really important that you understand. You can't just jump to conclusions with this. You've got to be really, really mindful of who is what and why. The other thing I wanted to mention was, although it says child, it does not mean that your parents in your upbringing could not have moved into this particular child state of mind at times. Okay, so you could have grown up with one of your caregivers who was critical parent quite a bit of the time, but then also moved into rebellious child some of the time. And you as a child would have experienced an adult in your environment in an authoritative position moving into that place. It would have been quite confusing, actually, for you as a child. But also, now that you understand this knowledge, you can now use that and understand it from a really helpful perspective. Now, it's important to note that rebellious child seems to have a really bad reputation. No one wants to fall under this particular state of mind, and they tend to get really offended if they even have the slightest inkling that someone is insinuating or that they have just realized they may have some of these characteristics, or maybe all of them. When a teenager is rebelling, they're acting out their feelings. They were in need of support or guidance or recognition, and they didn't receive that, okay? And they couldn't ask for it in a healthy way, usually because they're not even aware of their emotional needs at this point. And so what this child has done is they've started to act out these particular needs. I will initially actively seek out positive recognition. If I do not receive it, I will actively seek out negative recognition. Why? Because any recognition is better than no recognition. We have to understand that about human beings. A common set of needs or positive recognition that a rebellious child, or, well, pretty much most states of mind, need are to be listened to be heard, and to be understood. Most teenagers tend to feel, and I'm talking about real teenagers running around now, tend to feel very misunderstood. And that's because actually, usually they are. To actually hear someone, then you are listening to them to understand them, to empathize with them. You are not listening to them so that you can resolve, fix, rescue, or provide them with an amazing answer that you hope that they'll never forget. To understand someone, you need to empathize with them. You do not have to agree with them. Empathy is the ability to step into their shoes and try to imagine how they must have felt from their world, from their perspective, without any judgment or comparison to yourself or others. Other needs are that they need to feel as though their opinion and feelings matter, and that they are not being fobbed off with statements such as, "You're just a child," "How would you know?" "You don't have any children," or, "Well, you were too young to understand." Those statements are what makes a child, a young adult, and even fully grown adults rebel. Teenagers are angry with the world and everything in it. And feeling angry is easier than having to face the fear that they, as a human being, actually do not feel as though they seem to matter to those they love, or anyone for that matter. Rebellious child is one of my favourite states of mind, as I truly believe they are the most misunderstood out of all of them. Okay, so in order to recognise which state of mind you are working with, you need to take into account body language, tone of voice, and message. So, rebellious child's body language: arms crossed, uninviting, ready to defend their position should they need to. They can be aggressive and cold, slamming of doors, tutting, sighing, and sulking. Rebellious child's tone of voice can be harsh and aggressive, or even quiet and ineligible, muttering under their breath. And a rebellious child's message: they will use words and statements that are defensive, typically centered around the word I, but when blaming, will obviously include the word you. These statements are said in a particular context, so try to use some logical, balanced thinking as I'm saying them, and when you're relating them with yourself and others. "Oh my God, it's really not fair. I can't believe you are not going to drive me there. You're making me take a bus. I hate you. Wow, you have lost so much weight. Well, that's just great. You knew I wanted to as well, and I can't believe you didn't tell me about what you were doing. That's really not fair. I don't care how she's feeling. She's just jealous that I'm doing it and she isn't. That's not my problem. That's hers. It's not easy being me, you know. It's really not fair. Everything always has to be so difficult for me. Nobody knows how I feel and nobody even cares. As you can tell, I rebelled a little when I was younger. Rebellious child in villain mode. At their worst, they can be extremely passive-aggressive or just outright aggressive, relating to behaviour types, I am, right? They can be aggressively sarcastic as opposed to passively. And so they are usually the ones who say something quite judgmental and rude, finishing their sentence with, "I'm only joking." Wow, you can't even take a joke. Or, "Okay, sorry, I didn't know you were so sensitive." We all know somebody who said that to us, right? They are in need of a lot of attention and energy. They will use statements such as, "You don't care about me," or "No one cares," in order to induce guilt in others and obviously to get the attention that they are so desperately craving. Their favourite place tends to be a victim position, which is passive in behaviour types, as per the drama triangle, right? And I have put a link to those videos in the description below. Now, this victim position can be a difficult and emotionally draining position for those around them. And then when the rebellious child is not rescued, they will quite quickly move into a persecutor position, again from the drama triangle, blaming those around them for how they feel. Rebellious child in superhero mode. Like I said, rebellious child is one of my favourites. It really is. And they have an amazing superhero mode. They are able to achieve some of the most difficult and challenging goals, professionally or personally. Professionally, such as promotions and hitting targets at work, or personally, such as achieving certain fitness targets, health, weight loss goals, especially if they feel as though others think that they will fail. This will make them succeed even more. They can be very stubborn and they're able to use this to their advantage and the advantage of others. Whether this be as the leader of a union to fight for theirs and their colleagues' rights, or in family disputes, not giving up until they have proven their point. Rebellious children can effect great change using these particular characteristics, and when supported and guided, it can be for the greater good of the whole of society. If you look back in our history books, you will be able to relate a number of the rebellious child's characteristics to certain individuals known for their contributions to our societies and the world. Go and have a look, go and check it out, you will see. Now, do these characteristics remind you of anyone you know? Did you have a rebellious child in your upbringing? Was one of your caregivers or somebody in your circle of friends or family members or even at work? How do you feel when you are around these individuals? How do you behave? How do you respond? What ego state do you move into when you are around a rebellious child? Maybe you figured out that you're a rebellious child. Do you prefer the company of rebellious children, or do you prefer just not to be around them? The rebellious child's state of mind works well with some, but can clash profusely with others. Best buddies. Okay, look, this is a tough one because rebellious child can be a challenging state to hang out with. But if I had to choose, it would probably be adapted child. Why? Rebellious child loves to be in charge. Okay, they like to do what they want to do when they want to do it, and they avoid anyone who gets in the way of achieving this. whilst adapted child pretty much prefers to avoid taking charge of anything. They avoid making any decisions and they prefer to go along with whatever the general consensus is, with whatever's happening around them. And this is usually to avoid conflict. Adapted children really don't like conflict. And so they are both the opposite of each other. And you know what they say about opposites, right? Yeah, opposites attract. Arch enemies. This one is easy. Okay, rebellious child and critical parent are the two states of mind that, if at all possible, are to be kept as far away from each other as often as possible. Rebellious child wants it their way, and critical parent will never allow that to happen. Now, this is pretty much the beginning, the middle, and the end of their relationship. And most of their interactions revolve around either side trying to take back this perceived control. And it really is. It's a lose-lose situation for anyone unfortunate enough to have to be around them. Effective interaction. If you need to communicate effectively with a rebellious child, then the most helpful state of mind will be a nurturing parent, but using an adult message. Why? This is because a nurturing parent is at no point trying to take control or charge of the situation, and they are very patient and soft. This means rebellious child will not respond defensively. Hence, they'll put their guard down and then they will allow the nurturing parent into their space. At this point, the nurturing parent's message would need to be from an adult place. This is to ensure that the rebellious child is given the ability to understand the potential consequences of the situation and to be supported to move in a healthier direction, if and when they are willing to take this support. In small doses, rebellious child and free child or adult. I chose both because rebellious child needs to be around free child sometimes in order for them to just be able to chill out. Okay, chill out and have some fun. But in the long term, the rebellious child would become quite annoyed with the free child. Why? Because the free child is way too easygoing and inevitably, free child is not bothered about others around them. They'll pretty much do what they want. Rebellious child doesn't like that. I choose adult as well. Why? Adult, because rebellious child needs to become aware of potential consequences. They need particular messages delivered to them, okay? And the rebellious child needs to be aware of these consequences when they're making these decisions. Adult can deliver this message in a balanced way. They can't hang out too much because rebellious child will become irritated by the adult's logic and their perceived lack of emotion. Don't get me wrong, adults do have emotion. It's just that the rebellious child will perceive the adult's balance and logic and calmness actually just to be a lack of emotion, like they don't care. Finishing up, okay. Answer as many of the questions that I've asked throughout this video as possible and use them to determine whether you have any rebellious children in your environment, in your past and or present. Whether you think you may be a rebellious child, and then use this information to observe and gather data. I briefly mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, in my last video, and using this method to gather data when you have a sudden shift in mood and then making a note of your thoughts, feelings and behaviour. I've had a number of viewers ask me to make a video on CBT and the basics, which I will after I finish this series of videos. Now, when gathering data, also observe what ego state you were in prior to your shift in mood, and then which ego state you moved into during or after the experience has taken place. Again, these questions and these observations and this data is going to be invaluable. Okay, so make sure you are noting these things down. If you have any questions, opinions, or experiences you would like to share, please do pop them in the comments section below, as I would love to hear from you. If you have any topics you would like me to cover, again, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to get those covered as soon as possible. Part 5 of the Voices in Your Head series will be coming soon, so make sure you subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss out. Thank you for watching, and please do like and share so we can pass this invaluable knowledge on to others, especially to those we love. And remember, be a superhero, not a villain.